You know, I used to design irrigation systems for an entire county, the kind of infrastructure where if you got it wrong, the whole town would be underwater. So when a woman named Karen, head of an HOA I never joined, decided to sever my main water line using garden shears, I didn't get angry. I laughed, because what she didn't know was this: the pipe she just cut wasn't just mine. It was the only water supply for her entire neighborhood, and this is the story of how I, an old man who grows tomatoes, brought an HOA to its knees, just by turning a valve. That morning, I hadn't even taken my first sip of coffee when water started spraying all over the front yard, like someone had popped a fire hydrant in the middle of the desert. And standing at the edge of that muddy crater, holding a pair of garden shears like she'd just performed an emergency surgery on my lawn, was Karen. That's right. Karen, president of the Forest Creek HOA, raising her shears like she'd just triumphed in a life-or-death battle with my irrigation system. I remember the exact time, 7:43 a.m., because right then, I had just sat down on the porch bench, ready to admire the tomatoes catching their first rays of sunlight. This land has been in my family for 4 generations. My name is Earl Montgomery. I used to be a hydraulic engineer for the county. After retirement, I designed my own irrigation system powered by an underground spring that runs right beneath the yard. 20 years it's been running, not a single issue. That is, until Karen and her shears showed up. First, there was a sputtering sound from the hose. Then the pump started wheezing like it had a clogged artery. I stepped outside and saw a construction worker digging furiously across the street. Karen stood nearby in a blinding red windbreaker, clutching a clipboard like she was about to launch a rocket to Mars. I approached calmly. I've dealt with floods, dam breaches, and budget disasters that made no sense. I know when to hold my tongue before letting something stupid fly out. "Morning, Karen," I said, but she'd already turned, glaring at me as she declared, "Sir, you are stealing water from the HOA, and I am enforcing the regulations." I blinked. "Come again?" "This is HOA property. I've filed the violation report. You're not on our resident list." She waved her clipboard like it was a police badge, same self-appointed authority in her voice. I exhaled. "Karen, I'm not part of your HOA. I never signed up and I'm not required to. And the water you just cut? That's spring water from my system. It doesn't just irrigate my plants. It provides water pressure to the entire neighborhood downhill from you." She paused. I saw a flicker of confusion in her eyes. But then, like a flipped cat, Karen snapped right back. "That can't be. We just voted last week on water source management. If the pipe crosses our side of the street, it's ours." I nearly laughed out loud. But instead of arguing, I turned and walked back inside. Sure, I could have called the police. Simple as that. But something inside me, that part that spent years battling floods and drawing hydro plans, wanted to let nature take its course, and nature, as always, didn't disappoint. Karen had cut off my water, but what she didn't know was that the water pipe she believed to be the HOA's main line was actually just a flow regulator, one I'd designed myself nearly 23 years ago. I installed it to balance pressure between the natural spring that runs through my property and the water line that feeds the entire Forest Creek neighborhood downhill. The current city plans no longer show it, but the original land records from 2000 still bear my signature. And Karen? She thought she'd just uncovered some rogue hydrant, secretly leaching HOA water. About 3 hours later, I was sitting under the porch roof when I witnessed a glorious sight. 5 neighbors, holding watering cans and wearing wide-brimmed hats, had surrounded Karen's house like she'd just cut power to the whole subdivision. I overheard bits and pieces. "My sprinklers aren't working. The toilet won't flush. My hot tub's boiling mud right now." Karen, of course, insisted. "I shut down an illegal pipe. It's being handled." I didn't say a word. I simply stepped inside, opened the old wooden cabinet beneath my map, and pulled out a dusty folder labeled Original Water System Plan, E. Montgomery, 2000. That evening, I brewed a glass of iced tea. The next morning, I adjusted the pressure valve, not to shut things down completely, but to allow water to flow only during early hours, then slowly taper off throughout the day. The result? HOA landscaping started wilting like someone had cast, a drought spell over the neighborhood. By day 3, I received something so absurd I couldn't stop laughing. A legal threat letter typed by Karen herself, rolled up and stuffed inside a sparkly pink envelope, looked like a Valentine's Day card from a second grader. I had it laminated and framed right next to a photo of my father standing beside our original well, a new monument to HOA absurdity. But then Karen made her biggest mistake yet. She filed an official complaint with the county office claiming private land was interfering with public infrastructure. I wasn't surprised when a county public works vehicle pulled up outside my gate. A young guy named Casey, looked younger than my grandson, stepped out, clipboard in hand, polite to the point I almost forgot why he was there. I walked him through the spring, the valve, the regulator, the filtration system, everything functioning perfectly. After 20 minutes, he scratched his head and said, "Mr. Montgomery, you built all this yourself?" I nodded. He looked around, then back at his notes. According to the maps and pressure readings, the entire HOA is pulling water from your system. Do they even know that? I grinned. Only if they read the water use covenant from 2002. I'm guessing they didn't. Casey took photos of the records, asked for a copy of the system layout, and left looking both amazed and amused. I had a hunch he'd be telling the entire county office, and the story would spread faster than a broken main in July. Meanwhile, Karen was giving a speech at a HOA barbecue, wearing a sash that said Water Justice Warrior. My cousin, who lives 3 houses down, sent me a screenshot from the HOA's Facebook group. 3 attendees, 6 empty chairs, and a giant orange plastic water tank awkwardly looming behind her. I didn't have to do anything. The truth and the artificial drought were doing all the work for me. Every time Karen raised her voice like she was leading some righteous battle for water rights, the neighbors only grew more skeptical. As for me, I sipped my iced tea under the shade tree, watching the sparrows splash in the bird bath out back, the only place in the whole neighborhood where water still flowed. By day 4, Forest Creek looked like a sun-bleached version of Disneyland after a 3-week water outage. The main fountain stood dry. The HOA pool was cordoned off with a red tape that read, "Temporarily closed," and the playground lawn had turned the color of freshly cut hay. Kids rode their bikes past the public drinking fountains, now dripping like a bloody nose. I overheard one ask his mom, "Mom, did the water die?" Cute question, but the answer was way more complicated. And only I knew the whole story. Karen had traded in her clipboard for a walkie-talkie, which, judging by how she was using it, probably only broadcast her own voice back to herself. She pulled a mini wagon loaded with Costco bottled water, handing them out to neighbors like she was part of a humanitarian relief mission in suburban Arizona. While she cosplayed as a wartime water hero, I was still on my porch, sipping iced tea with the calm of someone watching a play where he'd already written the ending. By that point, the HOA couldn't pretend anymore. They held an emergency meeting at the clubhouse, which by then had no working bathrooms. They'd brought in portable toilets and parked them out front like it was some kind of disastrous county fair. I didn't attend. But Ted, my neighbor, a high school shop teacher and proud husband to a flower-loving wife, came by later to return the watering can he borrowed and gave me the full rundown. And oh boy, how I wish I'd been there to see it with my own eyes. Karen stepped up on stage in a wide-brimmed hat wearing a blouse that looked like it was borrowed from a 1995 local news anchor. She grabbed the mic and squeak! It screeched like it had been personally offended. The whole room jumped. She fiddled with the mic, then launched into her speech. We are experiencing a major challenge. But this HOA is strong. We are united. We have a duty to protect. And then, from the second row, a voice rang out. Karen, did you even have legal authority to order that pipe to be dug up? Silence. Karen hesitated, then gave a half smile. I acted under emergency. Powers per Clause 4.3 of the bylaws. Another voice cut in. What if you cut the wrong pipe? We've still been paying for water. This time the tone wasn't just skeptical, it was angry. Someone stood up with their phone and read aloud a section from the county infrastructure. Records confirming that the pipe Karen had severed originated on private land, my land, and had been approved for municipal use back in 2002. The room buzzed. Murmurs turned to voices. Voices turned to shouting. Karen tried to say something. No one heard her. A child started crying from the noise. An elderly woman yelled out, I haven't had hot water for 3 days. Karen winced, muttered something about a migraine, and bailed. She was seen fleeing the clubhouse clutching a half-melted gallon of vanilla ice cream like it was a bandage for her wounded pride. The very next day, my phone rang. A soft, slightly embarrassed voice greeted me. Hello, Mr. Montgomery? This is Vanessa. I'm on the HOA board. I was wondering if you might have a few minutes to talk about the water situation. I chuckled. I'm happy to talk, but coffee's on the table only after the water bill's settled. That night, I had just kicked my feet up, planning to turn in early when my phone buzzed. Not a text, not a call. A notification from the security system I'd installed around the main valve station, right behind the old chicken coop where the water line intersected between HOA property and my private land. I opened the live feed. No surprise, a shadowy figure crouched low, flashlight in hand, inspecting the steel valve box I had reinforced last year. A second person appeared shortly after, taller, clumsier, holding what looked like a utility valve wrench. The first person? I recognized it instantly. Karen, no hat, no clipboard, no signature red blazer. Just a dark sweater, her blonde hair tied up, and a look not of smug superiority, but of someone afraid of getting caught. The second person? Probably a Craigslist plumber, or some guy off Facebook Marketplace, the type you pay in cash, no questions, and pray he doesn't blow up the neighborhood. I didn't do anything. Just watched and hit record. What Karen was attempting to open was the central pressure valve, the very heart of the water system I'd designed, where spring water from beneath my land was regulated before flowing into the HOA's reservoir tank. If she twisted it the wrong way or too hard, she wouldn't just shut down the supply, she'd risk backflow pressure that could rupture the entire line. I knew that. She didn't. And then, the inevitable happened. Karen grabbed the wrench, latched it onto the joint, and cranked it counterclockwise, right next to the red warning label I'd slapped on it 2 years ago. Do not turn. High pressure. Pish! A jet of mist burst from the valve. Karen screamed, cursed, and slipped backward, landing hard in the muddy gravel. Her accomplice bolted, leaving her soaked and flailing like a raccoon caught in a kiddie pool. I hit save file. Next morning, I made my coffee a little earlier than usual. And I was right. At exactly 8:15 a.m., a familiar engine purred outside, Sheriff Rayner's cruiser. He stepped out with a clipboard and the look of a man who hadn't slept well. Morning. Earl, he sighed. We got a situation. Karen's filed an official complaint. I raised an eyebrow, not surprised. What now? Am I under suspicion for menacing the plumbing with my gaze? He chuckled dryly and flipped open the first page. The list read, Obstruction of public infrastructure disturbing community, peace, vandalism of HOA property. I didn't interrupt. I just slid my phone across the table. On screen, Karen fumbling with the valve, calling the plumber by name, shrieking as water shot her in the face. Rayner watched the footage, said nothing, then wiped his forehead with a napkin and muttered, "Mr. Montgomery, this is a textbook. Self-incrimination. And I'm guessing Karen knew you had this, which is why she tried the old attack first, defend later strategy." I nodded. "I'm not filing a criminal charge. Yet. I just want folks to see who's really stirring the pot." Rayner jotted down a few notes, said he'd process it as a civil dispute unless I wanted to escalate, which we both knew I absolutely could. By noon, the HOA group chat was lighting up. One neighbor posted a photo of their cactus thriving. Better than anything else in the garden. Someone else offered to trade 2 cans of coffee, rest 1 bucket of water. A local mom chimed in, suggesting Karen resign and open a bottled water business instead. As for me, I was back in the auxiliary pump house, fine-tuning the pressure gauges Karen nearly obliterated the night before. If she had succeeded, half the pipes under the neighborhood would have burst, and no insurance company would touch that claim with a 10-foot pole. I tightened the final valve, stepped back out onto the porch, and glanced across the fence. Karen's. Lawn was half dead, her rose bushes wilting like breakup letters no one ever read, and I smiled. Karen still thought she controlled the water. What she didn't know was, I controlled the narrative. Saturday morning, I was checking the pressure gauge and gearing up for a day of my kind of relaxation, porch sitting, coffee sipping, and watching tomato blossoms sway in the breeze, when a silver SUV pulled up to the gate. The door opened, and stepping out was none other than Vanessa, a member of the HOA board, the only one who from the beginning had never raised her voice, never sent a threatening letter, and never tried to shut off my water. In her hand was a chilled tote bag, with a few bottles of water and a container of homemade muffins. She waved gently like she was visiting an old friend, not someone representing an organization that had tried to dismantle my system. "Good morning, Earl. I'm not here to apologize for Karen, but I think it's time we had a conversation." I nodded, pulled out a chair on the porch, and handed her a glass of iced tea. We sat looking out at the parched fields on the HOA's side, the ones that used to have a summer-long fountain, now reduced to cracked concrete. Vanessa spoke with a voice that was sincere, no fluff. Some board members didn't know the full truth. Karen had told them I was illegally tapping into the HOA's infrastructure, that I was disrupting water distribution, that I was unilaterally taking control of a public resource. She sighed and pulled out a printed document. From the county records, the very same 2002 easement I'd handed to the inspector days ago. "She lied," Vanessa said, her eyes fixed on the page. She dragged the entire board into a personal war, then tried to legitimize it under the HOA's name. I nodded. "And now that the truth's coming out, what do they plan to do?" Vanessa was quiet for a moment. "Karen is losing control. We voted to hold an emergency meeting to review her eligibility to remain as president. But before anything's finalized, we wanted to ask you, is there any way we can settle this before it becomes a full-blown legal war?" I looked at her, not angry, not smug, just calm. "I never wanted war. I just wanted respect. This land is mine. So is the water system. If the HOA wants to use it, they need to acknowledge ownership, respect boundaries, and agree to pay for its use." Vanessa nodded. She reached into her bag and placed an envelope on the table like it was an olive branch. But when I opened it, it was a letter from Karen. 1 A4 page, typed, enclosed in a stiff plastic sleeve, the font perfectly uniform, more. Like a 10th grade English essay, then a letter of apology. The content? Due to unfortunate misunderstandings, incidents beyond my control, my actions were solely in the interest of the community. Not a single word of apology, not one admission of wrongdoing. Just a self-serving justification, wrapped in a professional disguise. I set the letter down and chuckled softly. If she thinks this is an olive branch, then she's holding the wrong tree. That's a cactus. Vanessa laughed too, for The first time I saw her truly relax since this whole ordeal began. Before she left, she said, "No matter what happens, I'll support a settlement with you. The HOA needs water, but more importantly, it needs to restore its dignity." That evening, I went to the shed, opened up the old blueprints, and checked the pressure valve. I didn't shut off the water. I didn't turn it fully on either. I set it to just enough to survive, not enough to thrive. Karen thought she was the one in control, but now the residents were starting to whisper, "Do we even need the HOA? If they can't handle the water, what good are they?" Everything was tilting in my favor, and I hadn't even thrown the knockout punch yet. Monday morning began strangely quiet. No hum from the clubhouse pumps. No splashing from the central fountain. Just the sound of birdsong and the breeze rustling the shrubs behind my house. I brewed my coffee, poured it into my favorite mug, the one with the Jefferson County watershed map, and sat down on the porch and waited. Around 8:30 a.m., the distant rumble of engines and murmuring voices began to rise from the direction of the town hall. The emergency HOA meeting was held there since the clubhouse still had no water. Hundreds of residents showed up. Some came out of curiosity, some out of frustration, and some just to watch Karen fall. I didn't attend. I didn't need to. News came from Ted, my woodshop teaching neighbor who once asked to fill a watering can for his wife. "You wouldn't believe it, Earl," he said, face lit up with disbelief and satisfaction. "Karen's out, voted off the chair. Only 2 hands didn't go up," I smirked. "One of them is hers?" Ted nodded. "Hers, and some lady who paints birdhouses and had no idea what was going on. Everyone else knows by now who really cut the water." According to Ted, the meeting turned into a public trial. Residents grilled Karen about unauthorized digging, hiring a fake contractor, and claiming ownership of piping on my land without any legal proof. She tried to argue, said it was for the good of the community, that she believed she had the authority, that Earl refused to cooperate. But then a woman from the back row raised her hand and asked, "Did you ever actually speak to him, or did you just show up with a clipboard and start barking orders?" Karen didn't answer. She pursed her lips and tried to change the subject, to the summer festival. But this time, no one was listening. That afternoon, I got a call from Vanessa, now acting president of the HOA. "Earl," she said gently, "we'd like to invite you to a meeting to discuss a new water agreement. Given everything that's happened, we want to do things right." I told her to come by the house, but this time, I'd be the one writing the rules. The following Sunday, Vanessa and 3 other HOA members came to my porch. No more stiff formality, no threatening letters, no wary eyes. They brought a draft contract, a few bottles of cold water, and, surprisingly, a basket of homemade blueberry muffins from the red-haired woman sitting next to Vanessa. I laid out 3 conditions: formal recognition of my ownership of the water system and primary pipe network, including the regulator valve, auxiliary lines, and the 2002 easement. Monthly access fees to be deposited into a water conservation fund and used to maintain the system as needed. No unauthorized tampering with system design or management decisions unless reviewed by an independent third-party expert. I also proposed the formation of a non-political technical advisory group consisting of myself, 1 HOA representative, and a local university engineer. They agreed to everything. That night, I went out and turned the pressure valve again. Not tight. Not halfway. I opened the full flow. Within moments, I heard the gentle hiss of water in the pipes, the distant spray of the neighborhood fountain starting to sing again, like an old tune returning. A child shouted with joy as the community pool began to refill. I sat back in my chair, watching the sun sink below the trees, and thought to myself, no lawsuits, no shouting, just the right person, and the right pressure. I thought that after the meeting with the HOA board and the newly signed memorandum, Karen would finally settle down. The water issue was resolved, the system back to normal. Everyone happily returned to planting flowers, watering lawns, and baking muffins for the end of summer fair. I even had plans to dig a wildlife pond in the back of the property, a haven for local critters and maybe a few passing ducks. But Karen was never the type to retreat quietly. And I should have known that. Friday night, a crescent moon hung. In the sky, the breeze light. I was running my routine security check, a habit left over from my years as a hydrological engineer overseeing flood control systems, when a notification pinged, "Motion detected at valve shed, 10:36 p.m. I pulled up the camera feed and there it was, crystal clear in infrared, two figures creeping around the fence. One short blonde hair tied back, the other taller, hauling gear like some kind of makeshift electrician. Karen, and a man I'd never seen before. No company logo, no uniform. Craigslist probably. A cash job, no questions asked. They approached the main valve shed like they were about to perform open-heart surgery on the neighborhood. The man crouched and began fiddling with the valve using an oversized wrench. And that's where Karen made her critical mistake. The valve system she touched wasn't some backyard faucet. It was Flow Reg V1.2, a pressure coordination unit I had custom-built 22 years ago, complete with safety locks and pressure sensors. Mishandle it, turn it the wrong way, and it lets out a high-pitched hiss and a reverse pressure kick strong enough to jolt you like touching live wires. And sure enough, it played out exactly like I expected. The man turned the valve. It screamed. Karen shrieked, stumbled backward, and landed flat in the mud. The guy, clearly not paid enough for this, dropped the wrench and bolted, leaving Karen flailing like a stranded fish. I didn't call the cops. I just smiled, sipped my peppermint tea, and saved the footage in 3 places: my desktop, a portable hard drive, and Google Drive. The next morning, right at 9 a.m., there was a knock on the door. I had already guessed. Deputy Rayner. Same dusty hat, same sluggish gait, like he'd slept in the cruiser overnight. "Morning, Earl," he said, wiping his brow. "Got a few things we need to review." I invited him in, pointed him to the seat by the kitchen table, poured him a glass of iced tea. He opened the folder, a new complaint from Karen accusing me of obstructing public infrastructure, endangering neighborhood safety, and malicious sabotage of HOA property. I wasn't surprised. I simply slid my phone across the table, video cued and ready, Karen, in her reflective windbreaker, clearly braking and entering, directing her accomplice, turning the valve, and then face-planting like a B-list soap opera actress. Rayner watched. 30 seconds of silence followed. Then he looked up. "This isn't a complaint," he said. "It's a preemptive strike. She knows you've got something and tried to get ahead of it." I nodded. I wasn't going to press charges. But now? Maybe I should. Rayner sighed, scribbling notes. "I'll file this as trespassing and tampering with private property. Could escalate to criminal if you decide to push it." "Not yet," I said. "But I want it on record." That afternoon, the HOA imploded. A board member emailed me a personal apology. A resident posted the video to the neighborhood Facebook group with the caption, "Watergate 2.0, Karen, but make it self-inflicted." The community lit up. No one defended her anymore. No more, "she meant well." Now everyone saw the truth. She wasn't just incompetent. She was dangerous. And me? I didn't retaliate. I simply nudged the pressure regulator down a notch. Not enough to cut the water, but just enough to make the water heaters wheeze and the showers cough like they had the flu. Karen had played her final card. And she lost. Not because I struck back harder, but because I waited. She never understood that the one who controls the flow controls everything. I still don't know who leaked the footage of Karen sneaking around the water valve that night, but within 24 hours, it had gone viral across the neighborhood's Facebook group. Residents shared, commented, tagged one another with captions, like HOA Queen turns vigilante by trespassing, or Karen became a meme overnight. Most importantly, trust in the HOA was shaken to its core. That evening, the HOA held an emergency meeting at the elementary school. The clubhouse still had no water and nobody dared use the restrooms. I didn't plan on attending, but my friend Ted, the woodshop teacher next door, went and later recounted every detail with dramatic flair. Karen walked in like it was her talk show. White blouse, fresh hairdo, clutching a stack of papers and a microphone like she was about to read the 6 o'clock news. She began, her voice dripping with artificial sweeteners. "We must remain united during this challenging time." She didn't even make it to the third sentence. A resident stood up and asked bluntly, "What right did you have to order excavation on someone else's property?" Karen started. I acted based on maps and community interest." Another shouted, "Belief and legal reality are two very different things, you know." And that was it. Those who had once stayed quiet now all spoke at once. Someone read aloud an excerpt from the 2002 infrastructure records, confirming the water lines were legally and privately owned by me. The meeting shifted into a vote of no confidence. Result? 94 in favor, 3 against. A brutal fall from grace for the self-proclaimed clipboard queen. Karen didn't say another word. She walked out pale-faced, not looking back, leaving. The mic on the floor with a dull thud. The next day, I received a letter from the newly restructured HOA board, now led by Vanessa, the same board member who'd once come by with lemonade and muffins. The message was clear. They recognized the water system and land as mine and requested to negotiate a new legal memorandum, including infrastructure usage fees, maintenance, and conservation responsibilities. I agreed, with one condition: all fees would go toward a local clean water and drought relief fund. That same day, I hired a small crew to begin digging a natural pond on the southern edge of my property, right near the intersection of my system and the neighborhood lines. It wasn't large, but it was deep, lined with stone, planted with reeds, and shaded by willow trees. Within days, birds came, then turtles, then frogs, and eventually, kids with bikes parked nearby, playing by the water's edge. Vanessa came by with 2 old garden benches from her yard. She said, "This isn't just a pond, it's a fresh start." A week later, I received an unexpected letter. No fancy watermark, no perfume scent, no bold legal font like the envelopes from before. Just a plain brown envelope, simply typed. I know I was wrong. I acted on personal bias and ignorance. I don't expect forgiveness. I just want you to know. I understand now. Signed, Karen. I folded the letter and placed it on the shelf beside my old valve schematics. Then I stepped out onto the porch, gently adjusted the main valve, and for the first time in months, opened it completely. A minute later, I heard the low hum of water returning to the pipes throughout the neighborhood. Sprinklers started up. The pool refilled. Kids laughed, dogs barked, neighbors waved across fences. No one mentioned Karen. They didn't have to. That evening, I sat by the pond, the sunset reflecting off its still surface, and realized I never had to shout. I never needed revenge. All I had to do was turn the right valve and let the truth flow naturally. This story wasn't just about water. It was about the right to live in peace, about boundaries, not just geographic, but human. And I think in the end we all, even Karen, learned that. I used to think victory would be the day Karen lost her HOA seat. But no. Real victory was seeing kids playing by the pond, neighbors greeting each other again, and people who once believed in the power of HOA, now believing in something far better: decency. Karen no longer walks around with a clipboard like it's a sword. She left behind a letter. Not grandiose, not defensive, Just an honest apology. And me? I sit beside the pond, listening to the water flow, watching sunlight shimmer across it, and knowing I never needed to win. I just needed to be respected. And sometimes justice doesn't come from a courtroom. It comes from turning the right valve at the right moment.